Scotty Hardwick, Bogan plays cards. Being a lover of foam, I tend to use it in a lot of my builds. I thought I'd set myself a challenge this time. I wanted to create a house or a hut of sorts without using any foam. As you can see from these examples, whether it be core foam or whether it be XPS foam, foam's just a wonderful universal tool to use for crafting, and you can texture it and detail it, and it usually comes out looking really good. But let's see how I went on without using foam. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button below. Cheers guys, enjoy. That Bogan plays cards! Alright, so we start off with just a little bit of cardstock. This is just an old bear box that I tend to hold on to the bear boxes because the cardstock's actually really good to work with. But that's what you'll probably see if I ever turned it over, and you'll see a couple of logos on the back. But yeah, I cut it into, rolled into a square, and then I measured it so that I could cut it into an octagon. It's a good test of my abilities to remember primary school geometry. So yeah, I penciled it all in, and then I grabbed my knife and I cut it out. Apologies in advance if my voice sounds a little bit strained and crackly. I've got a little bit of a cold that I'm working through. So yeah, then I got a whole bunch of coffee stirrers, and I put them together into almost like a teepee type look, almost like a tent of sorts, and then cut them to size. So these will be the roof of the hut. You'll also notice that I obviously wasn't thinking when I put most of this together, because I had to relocate some of the coffee stirrer rafters, but more on that later. Sanded them down so that they had a nice smooth point, grabbed the hot glue gun, heated that up, and then stuck them together. So the concept of this is essentially put a bunch of them together at each point, and then glue them into the center so that it would form a tent-like structure. But as you will see now, as I was gluing them on, I, in my infinite wisdom, thought I could cut some corners and skip a couple of the corners, so no pun intended, and put a couple of these sticks in the middle, thinking that I'd only need 6 of them. I then changed my mind and made sure that I put them all on each corner, because that was a silly idea to start with. So don't be like me. Obviously, as said in the beginning of this video, I'm so used to using foam for a lot of these types of structures, and the structural integrity is definitely lesser when you are not using things like foam. So that was actually a very cool lesson that I learned, the importance of ensuring that you use enough glue and make sure that all of your supports are in place. For example, the coffee stirrers here. If I just kept it like that, it wouldn't have had as much support, and honestly, I think that I would have encountered more problems along the way. So this part, of course, is for the legs, if you wish, of the structure. The main things that you stick them all in, and then you can put a a wall around them so you can enclose the structure. Anyway, so I grabbed a styrene texture sheet and I measured it out so that I could then cut it out and attempt to wrap it around the base so that to formulate the walls of the hut. I then changed my mind and cut it into individual squares because it actually sat easier. I measured them specifically because not all of them are 100% equal, and then I just labeled them so that I wouldn't get them mixed up, and then stuck them on with the hot glue gun. This didn't take too long, and it wasn't a bad addition because it sort of formulated the concept of how this building might have been made as well in real life, where you can see that it's been made up of different sections, different modular bits. So I was pretty happy with how that came out. Of course, left a gap for the wall. The door, very important, and then painted it all with a black poster paint. I proceeded to paint the entire thing in black paint as a base coat. And there we go. Starting to take shape, slowly but surely. Now I did notice that when using the styrene sheets, it doesn't actually hold paint as well as what I'm used to with foam and stuff. So if you see a couple of dings and bits that have peeled off, that did happen because I was probably a little bit too rough as well when painting it. But I was able to patch all of those things up as well at the end. But just FYI, if you're using styrene sheets for texture, if you're using it for the walls and stuff for this similar purpose, just be mindful that you need to be a bit more careful when you're painting because the paint can come off. It doesn't stick as well. So then I just grabbed the rest of the scrap cardboard that I had from the octagon that I cut out, and then I start cutting out the roofing palings. So to get an idea of how I wanted these palings to look, I originally grabbed a pen and I cut out individual grooves in the palings, just to give the illusion that some bits are falling off, some bits aren't sticking on as well. It's an old hut in the woods in my mind, and that's sort of where I was going with that. So I did the first couple with pen, and then I kind of just eyeballed the rest after I got a feel for it. But I cut it all out with a little pen knife, and then trimmed the lengths to size to fit the roof. Bended them all a little bit back and forth to give that sort of more rusticy old look. And then cut out individual chips and things to make it look like it's been beaten up a little bit. Get the hot glue gun out again, and then just started sticking them onto the coffee stirrer rafters. Starting from the bottom, going right around, and then slowly moving my way to the top. Now it was halfway through this activity here that I decided that I was going to make a couple of purposeful holes in the roof and things like that. So as you see, as I'm sticking these on, you'll notice that there's a couple of gaps and things, and I actually really like how that turned out. There we go. And then I stuck a few more on there, and now it looks like the roof is slowly coming apart. But still, pretty happy with how that's going to look. Gonna look even better once I chuck some paint on there. So speaking of which, time to give it that black undercoat. So as I was waiting for the paint to dry, I decided that it was time to give this hut a door. So using the same coffee stirrers, I cut them to size, measured the gap that I'd given for the door, and then started creating that. So it was just going to be a basic wooden door, so 3 braces and then just wood going straight top to bottom. The goal then was to attempt to create a hinge, as you'll see, but it was a bit flimsy for my liking, so I decided just to glue it in place. It no longer is going to be an interactive door, but that's okay, it still looks really cool. Then of course I glued it together, and then I stained it. Alright, so as I'm still waiting for the roof to dry, I gave the sides, the walls, a little bit of a light dry brush, quite a heavy dry brush, but it really brought out all of the texture, which came out really cool. You might see a couple of flecks of paint come off though, because I was a little bit rough, but this is how we learn. I've never really used styrene texture sheets to paint before, only ever on that rolling pin that you might have seen in some of my previous videos, to texture foam. So there you go. And of course there's the stained door. This is my attempted hinge. I basically just ended up using the other half of that and glued it on the other side so that it stayed in one piece. There's a lot of hot glue in this particular episode, but it really is the perfect material to use when trying to hold all of these different materials together. For once, PVA just isn't going to cut it. And there's the door in place. Sweet, so now the next goal is to make sure that I can get this roof painted now that the paint is dry. So I grabbed a lighter brown, I think this was a burnt umber, and I just really roughly painted everything so that it would almost come out as like a brown highlight amongst the black. Yet again, really happy with how that turned out. Then I forgot something. I realized I had not made room for a window. So I made a window. Cut in a circle, grabbed a circular stencil that I had lying around, and I cut out what is essentially a window sill of sorts. Because once you cut styrene, that plasticky styrene stuff, it doesn't really cut very well. So this got stuck on to the window to form a border, and that hid the rough sort of look of the cut. And I'm yet again really happy with how that turned out. There is no hut in the forest that doesn't have things like lichen and moss growing out of it. So that was my next and final decision for this hut, was to get some scenics, woodland scenics, and mix some PVA, because what's Bogan Plays Cards video without a bit of PVA? Mixed it all together and then started chucking it on the roof and things, making sure that I put it in through where all the gaps of the roof was to make it look like the moisture and stuff like that corroded or disintegrated the panels on the roof. And then just started putting it in other places as well, where I just sort of felt like it would look quite good. And then moved all the way down to the windows and made sure that I put some of it under the windowsill as well, where of course you quite often see a lot of moisture. And then moving on to the bottom of the hut, where I made sure that all of the bottom of the hut was also quite mouldy and mossy. And there we have it. So a hut, I really enjoyed this project. It's really nice to be able to challenge myself and push myself into a different way of thinking when crafting. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed the final product. Maybe you learned something through this, and perhaps you can take something away. Please subscribe and hit that like button below. Thank you very much for watching. That Bogan plays cards!